Hi, welcome to the Repeat Offenders Fishing Show. My name's Jens-Erik, and it's winter time. There's not a lot of fishing going on, and that's why we're doing some stuff at home. Today I'm going to show you how to service, how to maintain a good spinning reel, and maybe even tune it a little. And the reason why I want to open this thing is most of the newer Shimano models do have that easy maintenance port, that you just unscrew that little thing here, put a couple of drops of reel oil in there, screw it tight, and supposedly that's all it takes to keep these things in tip-top shape. What I did with this thing, I did fish it for a season now, and I used a reel oil with a coloring agent, a red reel oil. So we should be able to see whether that oil reached all the internal parts, just by making sure that we can see a little tint of red on all the metal parts. And I'll also show you how to clean it once we're inside. And for the tackled hearts of us, I'll actually bought a couple of additional ball bearings that will be installed in place of the default bushings in here. Well, this is a 2500 Sustain from Shimano, and let's open her up and see what's inside. Okay, the first thing obviously that we want to do is take off the spool like that, and obviously we want to take off the reel handle. And these two, the first two steps, are basically the only steps that you can do without any specialized tools. So maybe we should put this thing aside and I'll tell you what you need to complete the job. Maybe I should start with what you do not need. You do not need pets, pet hair, or small children. Give them away, I don't know, send them on vacation and get a nice clean tabletop. Preferably like an operating table, stainless steel if you do have something like that, because there'll be lots of small parts involved, and if one of those suddenly disappears, you're up shit creek without a paddle, because sometimes it takes a couple of months to get spare parts. And if you're like most fishermen, if you're like me, you do not have an alcohol problem as long as there's plenty of it. So you might want to have a beer or something like that, because otherwise the fingers, your fingers will be really, really shaky. Okay, and the next main asset that you might want to consider buying is, a small bit set like that, because you really need all different kinds of, screws and screw tops and all that. This will set you back, I don't know, $8 to $10, no big deal, and it should come in handy not only when deconstructing a reel. Well, and the next part is going to be the rotor disassembly. I'm going to take off the whole rotor part here, and what you need to do there is take off these little washers, and usually with regular models these just pop right off. Not so with a Sustain. Not sure if you can see it. That itty bitty little screw, that's the smallest screw that we're going to deal with today, and it's the first one that we have to take off. The first two really slide off easily. Make sure that you put them somewhere where you can find them again. I usually put everything that I demount in a straight line, so I know that I have to work my way up again once I'm finished. Okay, and now you can actually see the screw in full. And this is the tool that you need for it. It's really, really tiny, and I usually don't even use that part because it's so small, it's so fragile. I turn this with my bare hands, stick it in, and just take out that little screw right there, and do make sure not to lose that thing. Should come off any second now, and there we go. And this is worth its weight in gold tenfold. You know, just make sure to really, really, really put it somewhere where you cannot lose it. Okay, now this is easy. The whole thing just comes off like that. Just keep it together so you don't have a problem with it afterwards. And now we can actually pull the whole thing off once we unloosen that part right here. Okay, this one's the next one that you have to loosen up, and I use a pair of pliers, which is kind of a rough treatment. Be careful not to damage anything. And also keep in mind that this thing actually loosens the wrong way. You have to turn this clockwise, just a little bit. The rest you can do with your hands. That's because when you crank the reel, this thing actually has to tighten, otherwise the whole thing will just shake loose after a while. And then you can pop it off. And this is it. The whole rotor assembly just pops right off. Put it next to the other things in line. And this is the next part. This actually is the anti-reverse assembly. You do not want to open this at all if you can help it. You're in a world of pain. The first thing that you do when you pop this off is there's a lot of springs and stuff that's going to come at you, and you're going to have a hard time putting all that back together. You see those screws? You want to open the 3 big ones, not the 2 small ones. These will keep the anti-reverse assembly together, and these will enable you to pop the whole thing off. So what you want to do is you want to take these off, the 3 bigger ones. These will actually keep the anti-reverse kit complete. You just want to open up these 3. If you're worried about it, just open them up a little bit, and you will find that you can actually see them engaging in here, whereas these will keep these 2 plates together, so you know you're on the right track. That should be it. Yep. Came right off. Just put it there. And that's pretty much the first part. Now you can take out this part. And we're down to the body itself. Okay, the next thing that's got to go is that rear shield, the silver part. Be careful. I thought that this was the only screw. Bad mistake. That screw also has to be opened first. Otherwise, you'll find out the hard way that the rear shield is made out of plastic and will break. 1. Oh. And 2. And now if you're careful, that thing pops right off and will not break here, as it happened to me one time before. And now we can actually take the 2 halves of the body apart. It's going to be this screw right here. Actually, I can feel my hands becoming really, really oily, so lots of that grease that I put in there is actually starting to come into contact with my hands. A little more. Put it in line with all the other little goodies, and that one right there. And you also have to take out this piece of rubber right here. If you want to make the job a little easier. Just go underneath right here and slowly loosen the whole thing. just pops off nice and easy. Alright. And then you'll see 2 more screws right in there. You can take out these as well. Number 1, put them in line. Ooh, number 2, put up a little fight, more, and just a little more. Here we go. And that should be it. And as you can see, these 2 halves come apart without any problem at all. Make sure this thing stays on. I mean, it pops right off, but just keep it there. This is actually for the rotor, for the bail arm to close when you turn the reel. Okay, there's nothing further to do here. And this is where it gets interesting. You can just lift this off. This is actually, you know, the part that you turn when you're cranking on the reel handle. It's got a nice little ball bearing right here. And as you can see, oops, just popped off, put it back on again. As you can see here, it's really greasy, and if you look at the residue real close, it's kind of reddish, so that's proof that, you know, when you use the easy maintenance port, the oil pretty much goes anywhere that you want it to. And if you look real close, you can actually see that the red residue is pretty much everywhere in that reel. You have some here, you have some back here. You can really see that it pretty much worked its way all over the moving parts. So the easy maintenance port seems to work okay, but what you can also see is that after a season of use, that was actually a very fluid oil, and now it's kind of sticky, it's hardened, so it does make sense to take this whole thing apart and maybe put these little parts into paint thinner. Paint thinner works really well to take off the old grease, then kind of, you know, clean them maybe with a toothbrush or something like that, you know, dry them off and then put them back in here and give it a nice new coat of oil or grease. The one thing that I can show you here is also the mechanics. Remember that part that we pulled out just after taking off the rotor? It goes in here, and when you turn that, you know, you can actually see this piston moving back and forth, and that's actually what gets the spool movement going. And there's a small, it almost looks like a sickle blade that moves in these little grooves. It moves all the way back, then it has to turn almost 90 degrees to, you know, fit into the grooves that move forward, and then it starts moving forward again. Kind of that little here, that's the hinge that it moves around. It has to, you know, tilt 90 degrees again, moves backwards, and these supporting rods just make sure that everything stays nice and straight. And that's actually, this is where the magic happens. And you can, if you're tackle tart like me, because that little sickle there runs in a regular bushing, which is basically a round piece of plastic, you know, that has, you know, low friction, but not as low as a real ball bearing. And you can get ball bearing replacement kits, you know, with 2 or 3 or more bearings for pretty much every model. And as it happens, I bought one, and I'll show you how to replace the default bushings with 2 ball bearings here. Okay, remember the rear shield that used to fit right over there? That's actually the easiest ball bearing to replace. If you want to do a fast and quick and dirty job, you just take this thing off without demantling the whole reel. And there's the small cover here, just held in place by one single screw. You open that up, take it off, And that part right there, the light plastic round thing, that's the first bushing, which actually stabilizes that part right here. And with a little, just a little tiny push, it just pops right off. You can take that out. And this is the first replacement bearing. You can see, it's pretty tiny, and it's actually a lot bigger than the second one that we're gonna put in there. That thing goes right there. That's it. That's all it takes. Then you put the plate back on, and that's it. Job done. But remember the little sickle part that I told you about? That's the axis of it right there. This actually runs on a bushing as well, and that's pretty much the heart of the whole thing, and it really pays off to replace that as well. And to do that, I just put my finger on there to keep everything in place, and I take off that little screw right there. Really be careful with that. This is open heart surgery, and again, make sure not to lose it like I just did. It's right there. Here we go. That's why you need a nice, clean and clutter-free work area. Now you can pop that thing off. And this black part right here is the second bushing that we need to replace. It's kind of hard to get on there. One trick would be to pull these two, this and this axis out. Then you can actually turn this around and push it out from the other side. I kind of try to work my way around that. Just grab it ever so slightly. And there you can see the sickle part and the bushing that keeps it in place. Put this thing down ever so carefully and take the bushing off. Here we go. And this is the part that actually moves in these grooves all the way back, turns around 90 degrees, moves all the way up front, turns around again, moves back and forth like that. That's what actually gives that whole piston its up and down movement. All that's left to do is take that little thing, the ball bearing on top, and replace it right in here. Carefully. And now you have to remember where you put that very small little screw right there. And ladies and gentlemen, it's in the hole. Tighten it ever so carefully. Still a little loose. And make sure everything's running okay. To really make sure I'll pop in that mechanism right again. Looking good. Okay, I think we can leave it. Okay, before you do anything else, replace the back cover right there. That's a little easier. It's got that little pin to make sure everything sits nice and tight. And the screw's a lot bigger too. tighten that down. And when putting everything back together, after each and every step, I just try to make sure that everything's still in position. It really sucks to find out that it's not when you close the whole thing back up. It's like, you know, open heart surgery and finding out afterward that somebody forgot a hemostat in there. Happens. It just doesn't have to happen. Okay, looking good. Okay, next, before putting on the rear shield, you have to put in the 2 screws again. One goes in here, and the other one right there. Looking good. Checking again. Everything running smoothly. Okay. Rear shield. Lovely little piece. It's just plastic though. I wish it would be, you know, something more durable, but you know, it works. Put that in. The smaller screw goes down here. That's it. Don't tighten too much. As I said, it's only plastic. After tight comes really tight, and after really tight comes off. And the longer one goes into the handle. Into the real seat, I think it's called. Okay, check again. Shouldn't change anything internally, but just to make sure. It really sucks. You forget something and find out about it afterwards. The next thing is the anti-reverse kit. Just goes on here. I just keep the screws sitting in there to make the job easier. Don't tighten them up real tight in the beginning, just give them a turn or two alternately, and then start to screw them tight. Okay. Checking again. Piston is moving up and down. Everything looking good. Okay. Next step is the Rotary Kit. Put it on. Looking good. Now you can actually, for those of you who are interested, this is the part that actually closes the bail arm, as you can see. And this actually gets activated by this slope right here. Yeah, every time this little piston comes into contact with that, you can see the bail arm move and starting to close. Secure that whole thing with that bolt or nut or whatever it is. Excuse my English, it's not my native tongue, as you can probably imagine. And remember, this thing came off clockwise, so it's gonna come on counterclockwise, which really freaked me out the first time because I couldn't get it fixed. Okay, so you turn it this way to pull it tight. Okay, now my $300 specialty tool, them old pliers, just I don't know, a millimeter or two. Check if everything works. Bail arm should close down here. Boom. And when I turn it, yeah, the piston moves up and down. Everything looking good. Okay. This is actually, you know, you see this, it's a couple of washes, and I didn't even bother taking this part, or these parts, apart. I just pop them on, back on as is. And this is the real interesting part again. Open up the barrel arm to get a little more space to work with. And now you have to make sure that the hole is right in front of the opening right there. And take that $400 little screw right here. And careful not to lose it. Put in there. To lock everything in place. Just a little bit. Should be all that it takes. And last but not least, 2 washers, or 3 washers, I'm not sure. Never taken those apart either. Back on top of that. And that's it. Replace the spool. So, was it worth it? The whole surgery, was it successful? The first thing that we wanted to find out was whether the easy maintenance port actually works. Yes, it does. The oil just gets everywhere. Obviously, the thinner the oil is, the better it just, you know, spreads around. But we also found out that, you know, it just nevertheless pays to just open it up once in a while and get all that oil out. It really does age. It gets sticky, it gets hard. Wash everything off with paint thinner, apply a new coat of grease, and put everything back together. Maybe you don't want to start with a Sustain or another high-end reel. You know, everybody makes mistakes on the first try. Maybe get, like, you know, one of your old reels out of the cupboard and start with that. And well, what about upgrading the mechanics? Now this thing has 10 ball bearings instead of 8. Is it worth it? Well, are you going to cast any further? Not really. The ball bearings don't have anything to do with casting distance. Are you going to catch more fish? Probably not. So, you know, does it at least run smoother? Well, with a lot of imagination, yeah, you might think so, but yeah, not really. Yeah, those bushings are there for a good reason. They do an adequate job. And, you know, 8 or 10 ball bearings, it's you know, basically we do it because we're tackle-tards, you know. Hey, I got 10 ball bearings and the other guy's only got 8, loser. It's like modding your PC at home, or, you know, lowering the suspension on your car. Is it going to go faster? No, it just looks better. And, you know, it's just a nice feeling to, you know, tune your reel a little. Don't be afraid of these little miracles of machinery. Yeah, you can pay your local tackle dealer to open it up and give it a good loop, you know, a tenner or whatever. But you can also do it yourself, find out how it works. It's really satisfying to know how these things operate, and, you know, put in a ball bearing or 2, and, you know, make an even better job than the other guy will probably do. It's basically worth it. These things, you know, if you put a little effort into it, they will last you, you know, 2, 3, maybe 4 dozen years. They're really nice to have. Okay? Hope you learned something. Hope it encouraged you to try it yourself. Take care. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.